The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter. Part 1. The Inheritance. The letter arrived on a Tuesday that felt like the end of the world. 3 rejections from graduate programs, an eviction notice, and then this. A thick envelope with your name written in unfamiliar handwriting, postmarked from a place called Vera Isle that you'd never heard of.
Ms. Sarah Chen, it began. I regret to inform you of the passing of your great-aunt Cordelia Blackwood. As her sole surviving relative, you have inherited her property on Vera Isle, including the lighthouse and all accompanying structures.
Great Aunt Cordelia. You vaguely remembered your grandmother mentioning her. The eccentric sister who'd disappeared decades ago, who'd chosen solitude over family. You'd assumed she was long dead. But here was proof she'd been very much alive until 3 weeks ago, and apparently, she'd been thinking of you. The lawyer's letter included a ferry ticket, a set of keys, and a handwritten note in spidery script. The lighthouse has been waiting for the right keeper. I believe that's you. Give it 6 months before you decide. CB. Standing in your cramped studio apartment, surrounded by rejection letters and unpaid bills, you looked at the ferry ticket. The boat left in 2 days. What did you have to lose? Part 2. The Island. The ferry to Vera Isle cut through morning fog so thick you couldn't see the water beneath the boat. For 3 hours, you sat on the deck clutching a coffee that had gone cold, watching gray nothingness roll past. Other passengers huddled inside, but something about the mist felt welcoming. Like the island was slowly revealing itself to you. When the fog finally parted, you gasped. Vera Isle rose from the sea like something from a dream, all dramatic cliffs and hidden coves, wild gardens tumbling down to rocky beaches. And there, perched on the highest point, stood the lighthouse. Not the typical red and white tower you'd expected, but something more elegant and graceful, built from pale stone that seemed to glow against the sky. The ferry captain, a weathered man named Tom, helped you with your bags. So you're Cordelia's niece, he said, studying your face. You've got the look of her around the eyes. She was a good woman, kept us all safe for 40 years. Safe? The lighthouse, miss. These waters are tricky. Hidden rocks, sudden squalls. Ships depend on that light. He paused. Haven't seen it burning since she passed. Coast Guard's been sending automated signals, but it's not the same. As the ferry pulled away, you stood on the small dock with your 2 suitcases and a growing sense of unreality. The island was yours. The lighthouse was yours. The responsibility was yours. A winding path led up from the harbor, past wild roses and herb gardens that had been carefully tended but were now growing a bit wild. The lighthouse grew larger as you climbed, and you could see it was part of a compound. There was a small cottage attached to the base, painted shutters, window boxes full of flowers that somehow still bloomed despite no one caring for them. The key turned easily in the cottage door, and you stepped inside to find magic. Not literal magic, but the kind that comes from someone creating a space with infinite care. The rooms were small but perfectly arranged, with built-in bookshelves reaching to the ceiling, a fireplace surrounded by comfortable chairs, windows that framed the ocean like paintings. Everything was clean and ready, as if Cordelia had been expecting you. On the kitchen table sat another note. Sarah, I've been watching your life from afar, and I know you're struggling to find your place. This island has a way of showing people who they really are. The lighthouse manual is in the desk drawer. The gardens know how to tend themselves if you pay attention. Mrs. Holloway in the village brings groceries Tuesdays and Fridays. The real work begins at sunset. Trust yourself. Aunt Cordelia. Part 3. The Light. Your first week on Vera Isle passed in a blur of discovery. The cottage was full of treasures, journals dating back decades, star charts, pressed flowers, photographs of the island through the seasons. Mrs. Holloway, a kind woman in her 60s, indeed brought groceries and stayed for tea, filling you in on island life. 47 souls live here year-round, she told you. But we get visitors. Scientists studying the migration patterns, artists, writers, folks who need a quiet place to heal. Cordelia welcomed them all. Had a gift for knowing what people needed. You explored the lighthouse itself, climbing the spiral staircase to the lamp room at the top. The lens was enormous, a masterpiece of cut glass that split light into rainbows. The manual Cordelia had mentioned was thick and detailed, not just about operating the light, but about reading weather patterns, understanding tides, recognizing the different types of ships that might pass. But it was the sunsets that undid you. Every evening, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, you climbed to the lamp room and lit the beacon. The first time you did it, following Cordelia's careful instructions, the light blazed out across the water, and something inside you blazed too. This was what you'd been searching for without knowing it. This sense of purpose, of being needed, of standing guard over something beautiful and dangerous. Standing in that circle of light, watching the beams sweep across the darkening sea, you felt more yourself than you had in years. Part 4. The Storm. 3 weeks into your stay, the weather turned. Mrs. Holloway arrived with extra groceries and a worried expression. "Big storm coming?" she said. "Radio says it might be a rough one. You sure you want to stay up there alone?" But you were sure. The lighthouse had weathered storms for over a century. And somehow, you trusted it to keep you safe. The storm hit at midnight with a fury that shook the lighthouse like a tree in wind. Rain lashed the windows, and the beam of light seemed to struggle against the darkness. You stayed in the lamp room, monitoring the radio, adjusting the beam, watching for any sign of ships in distress. At 3 a.m., you saw it. A small boat fighting against the waves, clearly in trouble. Its engine had failed, and it was being pushed toward the rocks that ringed the island's north shore. You grabbed the radio and called the Coast Guard, but the storm was interfering with communications. The boat was going to crash, and there were people on it. Without thinking, you ran down the lighthouse stairs and out into the storm. The island had an old rescue boat in a shed near the harbor. You'd seen it during your explorations. It was small, but sturdy, and you'd grown up sailing with your father before he died. Launching the boat into those waves was terrifying, but the lighthouse beam guided you, and somehow you found the skill you needed. You reached the disabled boat just as it was about to hit the rocks. 3 people were on board, a marine biologist and 2 graduate students who'd been caught by the storm while returning from a research trip. Getting them back to safety took every ounce of courage you had, but you did it. The lighthouse beam led you home. Part 5. The Discovery. The rescue made you something of a local hero, but more importantly, it showed you something about yourself. You weren't just the keeper of the light. You were the keeper of the island, the guardian of everyone who found their way to this place. The marine biologist you'd rescued, Dr. Elena Vasquez, became a regular visitor. She was studying the unique ecosystem around Vera Isle, and she needed a place to stay during her research trips. "This island is remarkable," she told you over dinner one evening. "The biodiversity is off the charts. The waters here are like a nursery for species that have disappeared elsewhere." You started learning about the island's natural history, helping Elena with her research. She taught you to identify the different types of seaweed, the patterns of fish migration, the way the lighthouse beam affected the behavior of night-flying seabirds. "Your aunt was protecting more than ships," Elena said one day as you watched dolphins play in the waves below the lighthouse. "She was protecting an entire ecosystem. This place is a refuge." You began to understand the deeper purpose of your inheritance. The lighthouse wasn't just about navigation, it was about preservation. Cordelia had been a guardian of something precious, and now that responsibility was yours. Part 6. The research station. Elena's research attracted attention from the marine biology community. Soon, other scientists were asking to visit Vera Isle to study the unique conditions that made it such a haven for marine life. You found yourself hosting researchers, providing them with a base for their work, helping them understand the island's rhythms. The cottage was too small for multiple visitors, so you began converting some of the outbuildings into simple but comfortable accommodations. It felt natural, like you were following a path that had been laid out for you. Dr. Marcus Webb, a marine archaeologist, arrived in late summer with news that changed everything. "We've been studying the underwater topography around the island," he told you, excitedly. "There's a whole network of sea caves and underground channels, but more than that, we've found evidence of historical settlements. This place has been inhabited for over 1,000 years." The archaeological surveys revealed that Vera Isle had been a stopping point for ancient traders, a place where different cultures had met and exchanged goods and knowledge. The lighthouse stood on a site that had been used for signal fires for centuries. "You're not just carrying on your aunt's work," Marcus explained. "You're continuing a tradition that goes back to the very beginning of human navigation in these waters." Part 7. The Foundation. As autumn arrived, you realized you'd been on the island for 6 months, the trial period Cordelia had suggested. But the thought of leaving never occurred to you. This was home now, in a way no place had ever been home before. Elena approached you with a proposal that made your heart race. "What if we made this official?" she said. "A proper research station with funding and support. You could be the director, and we could study this ecosystem properly, protect it for future generations." The idea was ambitious but exciting. You spent weeks working with Elena and Marcus to develop a proposal for the Vera Isle Marine Research Foundation. The island would remain your home, but it would also become a center for scientific study and conservation. The application process was competitive, but your rescue during the storm had attracted media attention, and the island's unique ecology made it irresistible to funding organizations. When the approval came through, you cried tears of joy standing in the lighthouse beam. Part 8. The Community. Spring brought the first official researchers to the Vera Isle Marine Research Foundation. You watched from the lighthouse as boats arrived carrying scientists, graduate students, and volunteers. The island was waking up, becoming something new while remaining essentially itself. You hired locals to help with the research station. Mrs. Holloway's daughter became the administrative coordinator, and several islanders found work as boat operators and research assistants. The island's economy began to thrive without losing its character. Elena decided to make Vera Isle her permanent base, taking a position as the Foundation's chief researcher. She moved into the cottage with you, and your friendship deepened into something more. You'd never expected to find love in this remote place, but Elena understood the island the way you did. She saw its magic and felt its pull. "I used to think home was wherever my research took me," she told you one evening as you watched the sunset from the lighthouse. "But this place, being here with you, this is the first time I've felt truly anchored." Part 9. The Legacy. 2 years after arriving on Vera Isle, you stood in the lighthouse beam and realized you'd become exactly who you were meant to be. The research station was thriving, welcoming scientists from around the world. The island's ecosystem was being studied and protected. Ships continued to navigate safely through the treacherous waters. But more than that, you'd become a keeper of stories. Researchers shared their discoveries with you. Visitors told you about their journeys. And slowly you were building a record of the island's life that would have made Cordelia proud. You found her final gift on the 2nd anniversary of your arrival. A hidden compartment in the lighthouse lantern room containing decades of journals. Cordelia had recorded everything. The storms weathered, the ships guided to safety,
The changes in wildlife patterns, the visiting scientists and artists who'd found inspiration on the island. For Sarah, read the note tucked inside the first journal. I knew you would understand that keeping a lighthouse is about more than maintaining a light. It's about being a beacon for lost souls, a guardian of wild places, a bridge between the known and the unknown. You have the heart for this work. Make your own story, but remember, we are all connected by the light we choose to shine. Part 10. The Wedding. Elena proposed to you at the top of the lighthouse, just as the beam was beginning its nightly sweep. I can't imagine exploring any world without you, she said, dropping to one knee as the light blazed around you both. The wedding was small, but perfect, held on the island in late summer, with the lighthouse as your backdrop. Dr. Webb officiated, Mrs. Holloway made the cake, and researchers from around the world attended. As you exchanged vows, a pod of whales surfaced in the bay, as if they too were celebrating. Your wedding night was spent in the lighthouse beam, watching the stars and talking about the future. You were planning to expand the research station, to create educational programs that would bring students to the island. Elena had been offered a position at a prestigious university, but she'd turned it down to stay with you and the work you were building together. I used to think I had to choose between love and purpose, you told her as you watched the beam sweep across the water. But here, with you, I found they're the same thing. Part 11. The Next Generation. 5 years after your arrival, Vera Isle had become famous in marine biology circles. The research station was publishing groundbreaking studies, and the island's protected status had been expanded to include a larger area of surrounding waters. You'd been featured in National Geographic, and documentary filmmakers had come to tell the story of the lighthouse keeper who'd become a conservation hero. But the real joy was smaller and more personal. You and Elena had adopted a daughter, Maya, a bright 8-year-old who loved the island as much as you did. She was learning to read weather patterns, to identify different species of seabirds, to operate the lighthouse beacon under your careful supervision. Will I be the lighthouse keeper someday? She asked one evening as the three of you watched the sunset from the lamp room. If you want to be, you told her, but you'll have to find your own way to serve the light. Maybe you'll be a marine biologist like Elena, or maybe you'll discover something we haven't even thought of yet. Maya nodded seriously, already planning her future contributions to the island's legacy. Part 12. The Recognition. The letter from the MacArthur Foundation arrived on a Tuesday, just like the letter that had first brought you to Vera Isle. But this time, the news was celebration rather than sorrow. You'd been awarded a fellowship for your work in marine conservation and community-based research. Genius grant, Elena said, laughing and crying at the same time. My wife is officially a genius. The recognition meant funding for your work, but more importantly, it meant the world was paying attention to what you'd built on Vera Isle. The island had become a model for how conservation and research could work together, how a small community could make a global impact. Standing in the lighthouse that evening, watching the beam sweep across waters that were cleaner and more biodiverse than they'd been in decades, you thought about the journey that had brought you here. From a failed graduate student with nowhere to go to a MacArthur Fellow with a mission that would outlive you, it seemed impossible, but it was real. Epilogue. The light continues. 30 years later, you sit in the lighthouse beam with your granddaughter, teaching her the same lessons Cordelia had somehow known you would need to learn. The island has changed. The research station now spans multiple buildings. Graduate students from around the world come for summer programs, and the protected waters around Vera Isle have become a model for marine conservation. But the essential magic remains. The lighthouse still guides ships to safety, still serves as a beacon for lost souls who need a place to discover who they really are. Maya, now the Foundation's director,
has expanded the work to include climate change research and ocean restoration projects.
Tell me again about the storm, your granddaughter asks, the same way you once asked Elena to tell you about the first time she saw the island. You tell her about the night you first understood your purpose, about the small boat fighting against the waves, about the moment you realized you were exactly where you belonged. The story has grown richer with each telling, but its heart remains the same. Sometimes the life you're meant to live is waiting for you in the last place you'd think to look. The lighthouse beam sweeps across the water, carrying your light into the darkness, just as it has every night for over a century. And in that light, you can see the truth that Cordelia knew when she left you the island. We are all connected by the light we choose to shine, and sometimes the greatest adventure is simply learning to be the keeper of something beautiful and necessary. As your granddaughter falls asleep against your shoulder, you watch the beam continue its eternal rotation, carrying the light forward into whatever darkness awaits, secure in the knowledge that there will always be someone to tend the light, to keep the beacon burning, to guide the lost safely home. The lighthouse keeper's daughter had become the lighthouse keeper's legacy, and the light would continue long after the last star had told its story to the sea.